Okay, so so backing up to just a little quick background. So Aegis as a company has been around since 2006, starting in the compliance industry, specifically in the premium SMS industry, which became about, I want to say about a $3 billion industry in the US market before it was shut down. But anyway, we were brought in to develop tools and technologies that would essentially prevent fraudulent actors from doing harm to consumers. And of course, this industry spread across the globe, and we wound up working in Canada and Australia as well, providing compliance services for premium SMS. But it was really the foundation, SMS as a foundation, that allowed Aegis to develop its life cycle of compliance services. And this life cycle approach has been proven to be one of the most effective ways to prevent fraud that exists. And many of the settlements and legal actions, regulatory actions, the results demonstrated that the life cycle approach works. I can get into details with individuals about that if you'd like, but wasn't going to do that today. So interestingly, though, obviously, since premium SMS has not survived in many of the countries that Aegis operates in, we diversified into many other channels where fraud exists. And so direct carrier billing emerged as premium SMS declined, but other areas, short codes, SMS, 10DLC, other channels like location services where mobile apps are enhanced by the use of location data, identity platforms, IoT partner programs, just many, many different areas in the telecom industry, are trying to protect their consumers, their customers. So we've diversified into many of those areas, finding that the lifecycle approach and services that Aegis provides actually fits into all of these different channels. It's essentially designed to protect the consumers from end to end. So real quick, in terms of Aegis, we do operate two very separate business channels. I'm a focus primarily on the compliance space, but we also provide a whole market area of competitive intelligence. The interesting thing is that our job is really to integrate and collect data from the world, however we can get that data legally. So we're either buying it, we're collecting it through legal means, crawling the internet, or we are live intercepting consumer experiences, or we're getting transaction data from our customers. But at the end of the day, we integrate data and transform it into actionable intelligence for whatever product that is. And so many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, a large client that we were doing compliance for came to us and said, can you collect product price, promotion, and advertising from our competitors so that we can drive our pricing strategies? So we developed those technologies, and that's now become a big part of our business, but not my focus today. So from a platform perspective, we have three areas of focus in terms of products, but there are sub-products within those. The first, as I mentioned, is the compliance services. The second, we call it partner management, but this is really the whole identity vetting, history of your behavior as a business space. And since we've developed the automated platform, we've separated that out as its own product line. And then, as I mentioned, the other is really the competitive intelligence space. In terms of life cycle, which I brought up earlier, we originally were doing the market intercept work to collect advertising, live advertising, but also go run through the consumer experience. So the whole opt-in flow, et cetera, was captured and retained in our systems, but then evaluated for compliance. The live advertising was captured and analyzed for content, and is there misrepresentation or anything else going on here that's harming consumers? And we started to realize that when we would catch bad actors and shut them down, they would come back as a new entity a couple of weeks later, and we realized we really needed to create volume vetting, onboarding, and understanding who that company is that's engaging the customers. But we also realized that we needed to know what is the program that they're running, what's the campaign that they're running. So we wanted to know the who and the what are they doing to engage the customers of our carrier customers, right? But then we also, once we've defined who they are, we've ensured that their program is compliant before it's allowed to launch, we go out into market and make sure it hasn't changed. So that's either monitoring transaction data or intercepting live experiences, but making sure that it hasn't changed from what was approved to be in market. Interestingly, the last thing is that there's a footprint left with everything that goes on the internet, and that is the revenue generated, the transactions that are generated, the complaints that are generated, the refunds that are paid, is all the result of the business. And so getting that data into our process and running the analytics to look for anomalies that would indicate something is different about this specific campaign than was before, which might indicate that it's broken, or it's evolving, or it's fraud. But being able to tie both the market behavior as well as the business results of that market activity back to a product type as well as a brand gives us insight to turn that portfolio to a better place overall. Now, the other thing is that because we can trace back to who the brand is, and we are vetting and creating identity of who they are, when we shut them down, it's much harder for them to come back because we've identified them, we've got data on who they are, and our brands are asking us to basically prevent them from coming back. So when they come back and register, we've got all kinds of data fields to match them on. Good examples were that back in the premium SMS days, we were required to collect bank account information, a bank account number for these companies. And so we would see a company come back with the same bank account, but a completely new name, new ownership, all this stuff. And it turned out it was actually the cousin's brother's sister's mother of the guy that was there before. But the bank account, we could tie that back and realize, you know, this is the same bad actor that we just shut down. So this life cycle approach, if you will, which is all this up front of making sure we know the who, the what, the monitoring of what's happening, and the results of what's happened, tying that all back to the brands and the products, also allows our customers to churn the product offerings to better places. So which products are my customers using the most? Which ones are generating the most revenue, the least complaints, right? Because we've got that ability to run those analytics.
Fantastic. John, a question. Just to give people some perspective here, how many people are in your business? Because what you're doing, the amount of data points and information you're pulling together, it just seems as though you're a huge, vast organization with dozens of offices globally and thousands of people. That's not the case, is it?
No, I guess what I can say is that we're actually running at about half the people that we were running at 15 years ago. Average salary has tripled, but the reason is that we've developed technology and we've hired different people. So back in the day, it was sticks and stones, you know, Excel spreadsheets and email. Today, it's all technology.
So it's technology. And I think what's really, really interesting, folks, is to pick up on something. So premium SMS, it imploded. And I remember I was working for M-Blocks at the time. It imploded in the US. And literally overnight, AT&T had put the deliverer of the premium SMS messages actually on the bills of the mobile customers. So our poor, remember this, a poor receptionist in our office in the US was just absolutely bombarded by calls saying, hey, my little Johnny never used this adult chat service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it just unleashed a whole wave of negative sentiment towards the channel and took it down. But what's very interesting is you've got that data from that premium SMS time. We're talking 10 years ago. And you've got that data and you've retained it, and it's very useful still.
Yeah, and we only use what we're allowed to use. So a good example is when I talk about bad actors, oftentimes when we onboard clients, we'll look for the bad actors that they have identified so far in their business, and we'll build out the data around those companies and set them up within our automated vetting platform so I can identify them if they try to come back. But at the same time, certain data sets can only be used for certain customers or certain markets. And so while we have, you know, premium SMS data, it's a good point that we have it, but we're also very, very careful about how we configure which data we use for which customer and which market, because some of that is very protected data. And it may belong specifically to a customer, and it's disadvantage to them for us to use it as a national use off of our database, if you are a global use from our database.
Yeah. In the session just before the break, we had a sponsor session from Horde, and the regulator element was brought up. Actually, regulation was mentioned relatively little yesterday compared to normal events, but regulation is a huge issue. And we know mobile operators are sitting on so much data. We've heard various presentations say an issue is how it's siloed and it's being able to extract that data. But the thing is, it doesn't matter the regulation that is enforced, whether it's GDPR here or it's the Protection of Personal Information Act, the POPI Act in South Africa, whatever it might be, wherever, you can, within the bounds of the law, absolutely have access to a good chunk of it and make use of it. It's important to realize.
Absolutely. One of the things I was going to say, you mentioned the actual company that sold the content showing up on the carrier bill. That was actually a regulatory requirement that was placed on the carriers back with premium SMS. And they were also required to say that non-payment of this portion of your bill will not terminate your agreement with the carrier, because this is a third-party bill. And that was all required as the fallout of the fraud. But anyway, I'll keep moving. I'm going to skip the competitive intelligence. Let's jump into what was introduced, which is really identity integrity of companies that want to get on channels and do business with consumers. And so about 2 years ago, Aegis launched a new platform. We've been doing background checks for a dozen years plus, but we decided we would take it to an automated platform that would both speed up the process, reduce the cost, reduce the friction to the consumers or the brands. And we call it AIMS, which is the Aegis Identity and Integrity Investigation Management System. That little 3 is out of place. It's supposed to be between the I and the M, so it's AI to the third MS. But anyway, I'm going to give you an example of the configuration that we put together in partnership with the CPAS and TCR and NetNumber and others in the US market, which is multiple products for doing identity and vetting. And the idea here is that when you set up an identity process, it should really be dependent on what is that brand going to be doing on your network. And therefore, the greater the risk, the more you want to know about that brand. The lower the risk, the less you need to know about that brand. And so, in doing so, you can't just have one identity or one integrity, vetting product. You have to have the ability to be flexible and configure that. And so in this market, we've created an identity product. We've created what's called an automated standard vet. So this is basically a behavioral background check that takes about 10 seconds. And then we have the enhanced vet, which is when you get investigators to take all the data that we've collected for the first 2 products, and then they really go deep, and I'll get into that. But there are also a number of augmented services that surround this to handle things such as RCS or other channels. Payment channels, for example, will require additional information. The platform is actually receiving companies from over 180 countries that want to do messaging in the US market. So when you look at our maps of coverage, literally it's over 180 countries that businesses are from that are doing A2P messaging via SMS, 10DLC in the US market, and we can cover that. You cannot stand up a national identity and vetting platform and be able to, and have to say no to somebody because you can't handle their country. You have to be able to handle every request that comes in, and so that's what we've built. So jumping in, how does it work? Bottom line is we have front-end APIs. We're hooked into what's called the campaign registry, where they're hooked into over 1,000 aggregators that are submitting brands. But we also have large CPAS that are directly hitting us through our APIs as well. So they come in through the front. They are selecting up the product that they want. And they are submitting information about the company. Now, what we're asking about the brand in terms of submission data is no more than what you would do as a CPAS when you're bringing on a new brand customer, which is you're creating a contract. So you're getting some sort of government ID, you're getting a legal name, you're getting a location address of their registration, right? You might get their email, you'll get their phone number. All right, so this is the kind of information that our system takes in to this process. Again, then based on the product they select, the outputs are actually not just numbers. They can be pass or fail. They can be red, yellow, green. They can be yes or no. The identity, for example, is set up to be yes or no. Can we verify that you legally exist in the country that you're from and that you're a real business entity? Yes or no. That's one answer. If we get into a behavioral background check, we're putting out a score. That score is defined to say how much risk is there with this company. I'll get into more detail on this in the next slides. So diving into the identity. So this is really intended to be, are you who you say you are, and do you legally exist in the country that you're from? And we're doing this in about 3 seconds in the system. So we're seeing, 4,000 to 5,000 businesses every day coming through new to register and have an identity verification. Now, we accept the information that is being submitted about the brand. We verify that it's all real and that it exists, but we also have additional products where we can actually reach out to that entity directly to verify they actually are who they say they are. It's one thing to be able to say, I've got a valid business record of a real company. It's another to say, this is the company and I have their information. So taking an email, taking a phone number, a phone call so we can reach out via email, we can reach out via text, we can reach out via phone call and actually get pins back, right? And now we know that somebody there is responding. Now, the other question is, what risk data can we get on that email domain? What risk data can we get on that phone number? And so that's the kind of information that we're evaluating when we do a direct reach out is, does this domain for this email belong to this company, or am I looking at a very large public company and they're giving me a Gmail to contact them on? So in that instance, we'll do the direct contact, but we're going to produce a risk flag to our customers that says, don't know why this Barclays Bank would put a Gmail in. We're not reaching a legitimate Barclays Bank email. But anyway, all of this is automated, and these products are in the single dollars. So the idea is that everyone in a country or a market can register because there are no barriers in terms of money. There are no barriers in terms of complexity and what's being asked for about your company.
Yeah, a question. You mentioned no barriers in terms of money. How much does a verification cost? Can you say?
Well, so it's dependent on the configuration. So what I've got up here is just an example of a configuration. We can add things to this. We can subtract things from this depending on the market needs. Now, configuration in the US for an identity, we're charging $3 for that. If you want us to do a direct contact, it's a few more dollars.
So that's $3. So some people certainly in the online audience might not know what 10DLC, that's the 10-digit long code program in the US. The US has a very structured approach to the world of business SMS. You have usshortcodes.com where you can go and purchase your short codes, but they tend to be rather pricey. But then for a regular number, 10-digit long code number, you have the other program, which is administered by MEF member, the campaign registry, and John's company, Aegis. You do the verification for the identities at the scale and the speed. Just provide a bit of background.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and there are other companies.
Say for a startup, if I go and start a business up with Ross, say fish and chip shop in Dublin, let's do it. We're off. Bye. See you. And to go in Dublin. Yeah, that's it. We could do that. It's cheap. We could do that, but it's Dublin, so it's not the US. There's a bit of a problem there, Ross. It's not the US. But there we go.
Well, we can do Dublin.
You can do Dublin as well?
Of course we can.
Perfect.
I just said 180 countries.
Oh, you did say that. That's true. Very good. But so Ireland.
Besides, I love Dublin.
Ireland is
it's
one
a great place to go. Yeah. Anyway,
so rapid. And the thing is, if you're new, my question regarding this is, if we are brand new, we have no trading history as Ross and James together, Ross and R&J trading or something. How does that work? Do we go back to square one and you've got to do something manual?
No, no, not really. So we can still verify that you legally exist.
As individuals?
No, as a company.
Okay.
Now, if we're
brand new. So.
Yeah, that's fine. We get brand new companies all the time. Now, we do have instances where the data on a company that's 1 month old has not been updated in a government database because we're using authoritative sources for this, right? We're not using what you say or your website. We're using government databases. And so if the government hasn't updated for a brand new company, we actually do have processes where you can appeal and provide the document that you did with the government, and we can verify that. So like I said, you can't say no to people because of complexities of the world. You have to work everybody through. So we do have operations that come into play when they have to, but our objective is to keep that at a fraction of a percent of the volumes, because we're doing close to 2 million transactions this year. We can't afford to do manually 1% of those through this process. That's too many. So we're hooking up to data sources on a continuous basis, but we're also making sure that we're not saying, well, we can't find you in the automated source, so you can't come in. That's not right for the market.
John, another question. We had the first panel of the day talking about the whole area of fraud, artificial inflation of traffic, and in the crosshairs of the bad actors are enterprises. So let's say our fish and chip shop, we use SMS to send out a few messages every month, but then we suddenly get a bill going, uh-oh, it's 50,000 euros for SMS. We're expecting a bill of 500. So we're hit. There's some fraud. There's some negative association with the business. We can't pay that bill. Your credit rating might be hit, something like that. But it takes us time to actually fight that off and go, we're a legitimate business. It's fraud. We are fine. How do you deal with situations where companies, through no fault of their own, are hit adversely? So your risk indicators might be triggered massively and their rating might go down, but actually, I'm legit. It's an adverse situation. Would they have to be dealt with manually, and we would have to provide evidence as we would a
so you're going past identity and you're going into behavioral history. So
right,
I'm going to go to the next slide and let's address that. And that's okay. Let's address that. So the next step is a deeper analysis of the business, and it's not required for all companies. If you, in this 10DLC market, if you want to do minimum throughput, you can stop at identity. But if you want to go beyond that and do high volume messaging, then the carriers are saying, we're going to do a behavioral history analysis of your company, right? Part of that takes into account how old are you as a company, because if you are 6 months old and you have 2 employees, there is no history on you. However, when we run queries, we're going to get the employees of the company, or at least the leader of the company. We have databases that we're going to check all that information against to see if we can find you associated with any historical problems. But also the carriers have defined what is risk. So they've defined, we opened up our scoring algorithms and they told us how to score what we find on a company. So how to score you if you're 6 months old and we can't find anything on you is defined by the carriers. How to score you if we find a legal action regarding spam and phishing associated with your company has been defined by the carriers. So the algorithms that are running, our job is to make sure it's running.
You mean mobile operators?
I mean the mobile operators, okay. Yes. I mean the 4 large carriers in the US, yes. So, we're not making subjective judgments when we're assigning a score. We are looking for very specific historical behaviors across legal, criminal, financial, regulatory, international sanctions, watch lists, country of origin, where there's certain risks. But all of that is defined by our customers.
Are they aligned? So all 4 have the same definitions, or each one has its own variation thereof?
So the idea in a market is to get everybody as aligned as you possibly can, right? Now, technically, we can produce different scores for different players in the market, but that just creates confusion, right? So no, we're very close to aligned on how they want to be, close enough that it's not an issue. So, but anyway, in terms of what you asked earlier, we do also have an appeals process for this. So if a score comes out and that score puts them into a low throughput bucket in terms of volumes of messages per second or whatever it is, it can be appealed. Now, originally, I'm going to tell you this, we put out appeals as free. Just send us the appeal. Our analysts will look at it. We'll make sure that our scoring algorithms work correctly. If you've got something in there that you want to produce, that's really a mobile operator decision, not ours, right? But what we found was with the appeals process, anybody that didn't like their score, but didn't know, you're 6 months old, there's nothing on you, you got a low score, we were getting appeals. And so thousands of appeals, and we realized, well, there's no skin in the game from the brand, so they're just appealing it, and unfortunately appeals are manual. So we did put a price on appeals, in the US market for this. And now it's more reasonable. But the idea is that if for any reason the data we got back was wrong on that company and the system ingested it and used it, for example, for any reason the score could be different or should be different than what was produced, we're not going to charge for that. Right.
So can we also just establish that you mentioned it can be as low as $3 to verify your organization. Is that a one-off fee? It's not per campaign, etc.
No, it's a one-off fee. Technically you should rerun those annually. If you're in payment platforms, you might want to run them more frequently. But companies change. They get acquired. Bad actors acquire companies. Companies go into bankruptcy and decide to push the envelope in terms of what they do to make money. So, risk changes on companies. This information is good for the day that you onboard them, but it starts aging as soon as you pass that day.
So what you're doing is you're basically saying that you strongly recommend that if you're thinking about doing business with someone, come to you. Okay, great on the onboarding or pre-boarding on board, but it's worth that extra $3 a pop or whatever is to do it at least once a year, whatever.
If it's low friction, low cost, right? And they're not asking for my board minutes. They're not asking for my articles of incorporation, et cetera, that I got to dig up. It's an automated process. Then it shouldn't be a problem.
That's much cheaper than dealing with fraud at the back end.
Yeah, I mean, our true objective really is, a lot of CPAS, for example, do some of this when they're bringing on companies. Obviously, it's in their interest to do so. But if we can do it faster, quicker, cheaper as an independent third party, and they can then use that in markets, that's where we want to go, right? It's really about growing this industry. So how do we make this fast and efficient?
And John, talking about trust, you're a third party. And we know, so if I'm talking about like RCS business messaging and things like that, there are some operators that they don't want, no matter how good and the track record, you've been around since 2006, they don't want a third party to do any of this kind of verification. They want to do it all themselves. It turns out very manual. It turns out very slow. What would you say to those types of organizations?
Well, our experience was that when regulatory matters arise or legal actions arise, we're an independent third party, and our job is to find problems. We have no interest in the revenue generated by the business itself in terms of volumes of messages or volumes of RCS. So we are able, when we've been in many courts, we've been in many regulatory actions, producing evidence on behalf of our carriers. Showing how they're protecting consumers or showing evidence that partners that they want to go after were doing wrong.
Exactly. I'm talking about operators outside of the US. Of course, the US, you're fully within. But
but we did this in Australia and Canada too, right? So we'd love to do more in Europe, quite frankly. But anyway, and RCS is an add-on to what we do because we have been doing RCS verification services for a couple of years now as well, and the onboarding of the brands, but also the logo verifications and the background screens that are being used, depending on what the carriers want. We are working to automate as much of that as possible too, because right now the issue is the timeliness of creating the chatbot, doing the verification. How do we get to scale? And so our system currently does bring back all of the registered logos for a company. We have technologies that can do searches for unregistered logos and brands, because in those instances, we are gathering evidence that says this company is associated with this logo and brand. It's not an infringement on anyone else's. And so therefore, here's evidence, carrier that this brand is legitimate and they can use this logo and it's not going to come back on you. So we're pushing towards automating that, because honestly, you're not really going to get to scale in terms of generating revenue in RCS until you go for a much broader set of businesses out there that want to use it. So to do that, you've got to have scalability. But anyway, so the last product that we are offering in the 10DLC market, and it's just another configuration, is where we take the identity, we take the standard vet that's bringing about 60 to 70 data sources back per company to do the behavioral analysis. We then take all that data and give it to an investigator, and that investigator does an even deeper dive into this company. So now we're looking at related companies, we're looking at key employees, we're looking at key employees of the related companies, we're looking at all of the history of how they come to be, legal actions, all this stuff together, and producing a very large report. So up until now, before this, we're producing data out through the API. In this instance, we're producing a report, and there are instances where there is a deep dive requested, such as yours. So I'm a very small company, but I need to do high volume because I'm an influencer. Okay, well, some of our customers come to us and say, okay, we want to know, are they an influencer or are they really a retailer? Okay, we want to know their history. Where have they, and so for them to allow a very, very new company to go out and be able to create risk by sending out millions of messages, right? Because that creates risk. They want a deep dive. And so we offer this product as well. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that identity and verification services have to be agile, flexible, but also levels of depth that you go depending on the use case. So when it's financial, we often, if they're financial transactions like direct carrier billing, we're going very deep. Because there's a lot of possibility of things coming back on the platform and the carrier that's running that platform in terms of legal actions and regulatory actions. So they want to know who's behind that. A2P messaging, yeah, there's harm, but you don't need to go as deep as you go on a financial transaction necessarily. By the way, I'll add something. So I talked about the life cycle process. So the other thing that's happening in the US that Aegis is doing, we're actually getting the Apple complaint data, the swipe right and report junk data. And this is massively large sets of data on a daily basis of consumers that are reporting junk to their carrier. And so a carrier there has brought us on to develop the platform that gets the millions of complaints every day. We've implemented AI and natural language processing, machine learning to basically filter out what's a false, not harmful message that's just being reported as junk accidentally versus what is harmful. What are the brands that are being impersonated? Is this a political campaign, which is huge right now in the US as unwanted messaging? But we've got live dashboards that are actually identifying attacks as they go. Now, why is this important? Because from a lifecycle perspective, through this platform, we're actually getting the sender number. So we know if it's a short code, we know if it's an email gateway, we know if it's 10DLC, we know exactly where it's originating from because that comes in each message. But we're also getting the content of the message. We're getting the customer's phone number that it went to. But it's coming in as individual files for every complaint. You're getting a million of those. So we're transferring them into graph databases and running analysis and producing live alerts, but also then doing traceback. So I can take originating information and go find out who's behind this, especially with the registry for 10DLC, which has millions of brands in it. We can, we've tied a phone number to a campaign to a brand in partnership with NetNumber over there. So what we then do is we do a deep dive on that company, all the related companies, and all of a sudden we find out, wait a minute, there's 348 companies that are being run by the same people that are doing this, right? And so our reports are evidence that legal can use now to take them down, but we also, with the control of 10DLC in the US market, the carrier can shut off that phone number's text enablement immediately. There's literally a portal, they just go in and do it. And that's a NetNumber TCR enablement. So from a life cycle perspective, I should also mention my friends of Adaptive and Proofpoint. Thank you. We're passing them the complaint data, right? Because they're the active firewalls for many of the carriers there. And then we're working to get data back, but we're also working to take this data that's coming from the consumers. They're saying, look at this. I don't want this message. This is a bad message. And we are working to get the information back to the CPaaS, the direct connect CPaaS, so that they can take action from their side as well. Now, we have to be very careful because, number one, we're peeling off the consumer's phone number. That's not going anywhere, right? That stays with our clients. But we can do dips into the NetNumber database to identify which CPaaS the sending phone number belongs to. From there, we can then pass that data to that CPaaS on a continuous basis so they can take action as well. So we've created we're creating a communications loop because we've set up these processes. And again, it takes me back to what Aegis was doing, 15 years ago, setting up a life cycle approach, right? It's the who, it's the what, and then it's the what's happening and the results, and then having that all communicate back and forth. The only difference is in this instance, the technologies have changed, and there are a lot of very talented players that are operating, and we're working to communicate with each other. And I think that's where we need to go. So.
John, I'm sorry to say, but we need to close up our session very, very soon. There we go. It's fine. We have got time for questions. John Coleman from Net Number.
Thank you, James. Anytime you can make a sales guy say less words, that's a good thing, right? So, no, I just wanted to comment and maybe point out, we've worked with John and the TCR over the past few years, actually several years, and what we found helpful in the U.S. market was that John creates a great scoring system for the enterprises. It's ubiquitous, and the multiple carriers can use it and depend on that information. And it's really helped control and protect not only subscribers, but the enterprises from that one instance you described. So we really appreciate all the work you've done, John. And it's not just US, it's globally. There's a lot of other things going on. But yeah, using our registry and John's capabilities and other partners bolted onto all the MNOs, the carriers, has really helped. And I think there's still challenges with that because you've got multiple products depending on the different channels and what's there. And I think to your point, the more that we get the feedback loops, that we can help control the costs, because people want good messages delivered to the subscribers, and the subscribers want to get those. So it's been very helpful to do that, and I think it's a good model that we can use for everybody. To your point, James. So
you and I should trade places. I'll sit there. Thank you.
You get the better shoes, John. You look a lot better in a suit than I do these days. But thanks. Great stuff.
His shoes are from Italy. There's a story behind those. I know the story. But anyway, thank you very much, everyone. John, thank you. It's really, really interesting seeing nearly there. Stop. Every single stage of that process. The key thing is this can be done at scale. And I know for 3 years here at MEF, about the little guy, the small, medium-sized businesses. How do we bring them into the mobile community as a whole? And the first stage is actually verifying they are who they say they are. And we've heard that can be done at scale, and it can be done for a very, very reasonable price indeed. And that's the first stage in this. And the rest comes after and is the job of all you guys in the room and online. So, John, thank you very much. But haven't finished yet. Thank you for your sponsorship, and a personal note of thanks. There are very, very few CEOs of any MEF member who actually come to our working groups religiously and regularly and contribute so much. So a personal vote of thanks to you for the 3 years that I've been here. You've been coming along and contributing so much. Thank you.
And we're going to miss you, James, but we'll see you here on the other side of the fence.
Oh, you will. Yeah. Thank you very much, John.